So my first project was at the age of 18, and my very first design of the swimming pool and the restaurant was with a big pen and a piece of paper. And I remember showing it to my boss, and he was like, "Okay, fine. You know what? Yeah, let's go for it." And I was like, "Wait, what?"
Palava Podcast. Welcome everyone to another episode of the Palava Podcast. This time I have my friend Hamude on the on the podcast. This has been a long time coming, which is I'm really glad we got here kind of naturally.
Yeah,
Eventually.
had to happen.
Had to happen. He
Matter
actually
of time.
cornered me one day. Well, you didn't really corner me. We were having a chat.
Yes.
And then I realized he was telling me how much he loves the podcast. And I didn't even know he was such a fan. And then I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And was like, definitely have to have you on it. There's no other way. So we're going to just get into all things Hamude / Space Accra / Charles.
Into the nitty gritty.
Yes. So first of all, let's start with you. Start with your name. So I know you as Hamude. We were touching on this earlier about where the Charles Quartey comes from.
Yes. And why?
And why?
Yeah.
Because I think it's super super interesting how people know you as different things. Even me, like at university, I had a nickname Frankie. No one calls me Frankie in Ghana. But like, so you kind of know where people know you from depending on what they call you.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good way to gauge. Yeah. No, but thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be on the podcast. I think this is the coolest podcast in terms of getting to know people, getting to know Ghana, getting to know how things work. And then also I think the identification part
Yeah.
of things is also very important. So let me start. Um my name is Hamude El Halabi, born Hamude El Halabi, transitioned into Hamude Charles Quartey El Halabi after some time. I was born here in Ghana, 37 Military Hospital, moved to Kumasi, and stayed there till I was 10.
Oh, wow.
And from the age of 10, I moved to the Netherlands because my family has this tradition of when we come of age, because my grandma is Dutch, we go to Holland for education, and
Okay.
after we graduate we come back. So it's
Okay.
kind of been a trend. My mom did it, me and my sisters did it, and so we came back.
But the
around-
coming back is optional.
no, the coming back was actually mandatory. I mean, it was
Okay.
not it was mandatory. I mean, it was dubbed optional, but you know when you keep saying the same thing
Yeah.
it automatically, and I think it's also something that we kind of looked forward to as kids. I think living in Holland was amazing. I loved it, but there was always this notion, or this thought, or I mean this fact, and you would say it to the people around you and your friends, even in your relationships with your girlfriends, like, I'm leaving
Yes.
this country at
Yes,
some point.
At some point.
You know, which I think in my final year was something that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning. 2013, I came back to Ghana for good,
Yeah.
knowing that I kind of wanted to, develop myself and grow as well as fast as I could, and that there were a lot of restrictions in Holland that you did not have in
Yes.
Ghana.
Yep. I think I felt the same way. That was my thing, was like getting there and being like, yeah, this where we come from is kind of freer than this.
Yeah.
And you can kind of decide who you're going to become, decide how
Yeah.
you're going to navigate things that like Holland and the UK, I think, just don't provide.
Yeah, no.
Especially for people who look like us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so then I came back to, actually, the first time I returned to Ghana was I took a gap year after high school. Came back, reunited with my dad, and then just worked for a year. And I told my dad for a fact, I was always passionate about construction. My dad was a construction manager at Consort for a very long time.
That's where it comes from.
So that is definitely where it comes from. So I said I wanted to go into construction, and he got me a job with Barbizotti.
Yeah.
And it was a private project. They were building La Villa Boutique Hotel.
Oh, wow.
So my first project was at the age of 18, and that
Yeah.
was La Villa Boutique Hotel, and that was with Niama Olenu and
Yeah.
Federico Barbizotti.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a design or a plan, and it was a private investment, so they approached it very organically, right? So in the end, I managed to design the restaurant, the swimming
Yeah.
pool, the bathrooms.
One of my favorite places, by the way.
Yeah.
When I moved back, it was like one of my favorite places.
Right, and I think the magic in that project, which I miss a lot, is the freedom
Yeah.
that was given to say, we don't like this way, break it today, and then we build it up tomorrow, and
Yeah.
then we can shift this here. And my very first design of the swimming pool and the restaurant was with a big pen and a piece of paper, and I remember showing it to my boss, and he was like, okay, fine. You know what? Yeah, let's go for it. And I
Yeah.
was like, wait, what? And it's like, we are going for this. We are going to do. And I think that at the age of 18, that was for me was like, it snapped. It
Light
was
bulb.
like,
Yeah.
hey, I can be trusted here,
Yeah.
and I can do this. And I know I can do this. And so after my gap year, I went back with the determination that I was going to come
Okay.
back. And
Yeah.
so I studied construction. I graduated Friday the 13th, 2013.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember when
Good luck.
yes, and that was my final presentation. And at the end of the presentation, they said, "You passed, right?"
Mhm.
And I went home. I booked my ticket, and 3 weeks later, I was in. I was
You know,
in
I
Ghana.
feel like that's just as fast as like I left. I think I graduated September, my master's. December, I was back in Ghana.
Yeah.
That was it.
Boom.
Yeah.
Finished. Yeah. I remember Friday the 13th and 9th of January. These 2 dates
Oh,
I will
wow.
never forget. And I also remember that. I remember that when I left Holland, I had €1.53
Oh my
in my
gosh.
bank account, and I was like, "This is not going to end well." You know,
not
I
with
need to
$1.
go. So I got into Ghana. I went straight to my former boss, and at that time he was building all my colonial suites.
Yeah.
And I went there and I was like, I need a job. I need a
Yeah.
job now. And he's like, then take this job. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay. So he called the project manager. It was during that week. He called the project manager and said that he wanted to hand the project over to me, and so that the project manager would work. But this was an established Italian construction manager who wasn't going to take it.
No.
And so that was my first experience as a project manager in Ghana. I remember that
So, but before you get into like what the experience was like, that taking a step back to sort of Holland and your experience in Holland of like just like life in there, applying for jobs before, because I'm assuming you finished kind of high school, college, maybe looked for some types of opportunities before you came back, or was it like
no. It was
so it was
it was
while you
out,
were
yeah,
like
yeah.
high school and stuff that you were looking for work?
Yeah, I think growing up in Holland, it's a very standard thing for people to go to school and to work,
Yeah.
right? So I had my first paper job at 13. I worked in a supermarket at the age of 15.
Yeah.
I was doing admin for my mom's company at 17.
Yeah.
I was selling postcards for abuse for child abuse from door to door, only to realize after 2 years that it was a scam. I did that. I polished hospital floors for a very long time.
You know, this story, I find that people don't know what we did when we were in the UK. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like the other day I was talking to my staff about it, and I was talking about like, oh yeah, when I was in the UK and I was at university, I was working in a bar, I was like cleaning, I was, I used to work in a club. I used to finish my shift at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
I used to go home, sleep for 2 hours, go to economics class at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
Like, that was my regular weekend, like, job and shift. And they were like, huh? I was like, yes. Like, it's not like I just showed up in Ghana and just
Yeah, in fact, should
started
we
a
tell them?
company.
Yeah, should we tell them? Like,
it's really not that great.
No,
like, you really
no.
have to hustle. And like,
you have to hustle.
and
yeah.
how did because I know I had issues with finding work with my name, but how did you find it with yours? Because what was that like?
It was terrible. It was terrible. It wasn't terrible until I realized that it was happening, right? And I think that growing up, getting into Holland at the age of 10, and I'm not gonna lie, Holland was not necessarily in my eyes a racist country when I was growing up because of the people around me that actually made me feel like I was normal and everything was good. I think it was once I started entering into the working world and society at a different stage that I started realizing, oh, why am I always grouped with this
people.
and why is this? And then I started realizing, and then you learn obviously from the streets and from home that this is racism. Sometimes
This is
you're
what it
different
looks
than
like.
and I think for me the harshest moment of realization was when I think I was I was 19 or 20. I was looking for a job, and this was Amsterdam, and there was a paper on this on a glass vitrage, or how do you call it, right? Looking for personnel, and it was a bar, and I went in there, and I was like, it was a new bar, they just opened, and they were like, yeah, we're looking for people, this that, and I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. So I applied, and then I went back home, and my girlfriend at the time was looking for a job, and I was like, babe, this is perfect. We should do this together. Don't tell them that we're together, but just do it. So she went and did the same thing, right? So a week after, she got a call, And they were like, yeah, we want you to come in, this, that. Okay, so she had, and I was like, well, I'll get my call. I'll get my call. I'm
Yeah.
gonna get my call. No call. Second week, no call. Third week, no call. So then I was like, you know what? Something ain't right. So I went there to pick her up, and that's when I walked in, and then the lady saw me, and I was like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then she's like, "Good." And I was like, "Hey, I never heard back from you." And then she's like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. Like your CV came in too late." And so that's when I started confronting, and I was like, "Okay, but if my CV came in too late, how is it that you hired her?" And she's like, "Oh, we already hired her." I was like, "That's my girlfriend, and I recommended her to come and apply here."
After
And
I
that was that
applied.
moment of, and that was
Oh
in
my
that very
God.
moment that like I was super frustrated. Went home, and then she's like, "Oh, you know, and this that," and it's like, "No, this
That's
is
what
it
that
is
is.
what it
Yeah.
is what it is, right?" So that was a moment for me to say, I have to go back, and that
Yeah.
was a moment for me to say, I'm not necessarily accepted as Hamoudi Al Halabi as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then from one day to another, I knew that at that time when you would be looking for jobs, they check your Facebook profile, right? So the
Yes.
first thing I did was change my Facebook and my link,
Profile to
and then
Charles
I
Quartey.
started applying for jobs, right? And Charles Quartey is way more interesting,
Yeah.
in Dutch context,
Yeah.
as opposed to
Yeah.
Hamoudi El Halabi, and that's when I started getting hits, and that was when,
That's so crazy.
yeah, and that's when I realized that I had to accept the fact that I have to be strategic about my name.
Yeah.
Applying for jobs where they require pictures
Yeah.
was an issue for me,
Yeah.
which was like, oh man, if I put a picture, they're gonna think I'm a Moroccan.
Yeah.
And then
Yep.
yeah. So I
Because they
think
don't actually ask; they just assume.
they just assume. Yeah, they just assume. And so yeah, I think that I never really let it get to me. I'm a very optimistic person. It's like, if I can't enter through this door, I'm gonna find another door. I will come.
Yeah.
And so then fast forward coming to Ghana, and how that name developed was, my father's Lebanese, right? Unfortunately, moving to Holland and everything, we never really got Arabic classes, and the culture
Yeah.
really passed us by a little bit, which was a little
It's
bit of
how
a
it
shame,
happens.
right?
Yeah.
So our dear Lebanese community here is also strict on that. I'm not going to lie, right? The fact that I don't speak Arabic, the fact that I was gone for a while, made it also very difficult for me to walk in or come into the Lebanese community and say,
Yeah.
this is what I do and I'm looking for jobs, etc.,
Yeah.
etc.
But then you don't speak Arabic.
But I don't speak Arabic. And then there's so many other cultural issues and stuff that we don't maybe want to go in. But so then I realized that, hey, I'm going against the current.
Going
here.
on both sides.
Yeah.
But I think that's something about being multicultural or from a multicultural background that people don't realize how you have to kind of morph depending
Yeah.
on the context, right?
Yeah.
So like in Ghana, you're Hamude in some instances, you're Charles Quartey, because that Quartey too opens a lot of doors for you, right? And it's
100%.
one of the reasons why I didn't change my name when I got married. My husband's name is Samuel Arthur. He's Fanti. It is the whitest name you could. It has been beneficial for him in many ways,
Yes,
right? As a black man,
yes.
when they see Samuel Arthur and then he shows up and they're like, no, not the
Surprise.
Samuel Arthur
Yeah.
that I was expecting. Whereas for me here, if I have Francis Arthur, it removes any kind of cultural context of me making my claim that I'm Ghanaian.
Yeah, there's
Right?
no spice in that. Yeah.
They just don't believe it. They're like,
Yeah.
yeah, by your name, and then the way you look, even if your father is Ghanaian, we don't believe you.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas with the
What about
Kwakupum,
Yeah.
no, I mean, there's just no contradiction. Even
No.
if they're like, oh, you're not Ghanaian, I'm like, Kwakupum, they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't get more Ga than that
Yeah.
in so many ways.
Yeah,
right?
no,
So,
absolutely.
And Quartey as well is a Ga
Quartey,
name. Like,
yeah.
it's a very
It's a
well-known
very- yeah,
Ga name. So
yeah.
it's like, it's one of those things that it helps ground you as well.
Yeah, it
I
works.
think.
It works. It works. It works. It works. And no, I just had a coffee with my dad, and I was like reminding him. I was like, remember, I'm still Hamoudi, right?
Yeah.
Don't be fooled by the business card saying Charles
Charles,
Quartey. It's
yeah,
like, and then often at times when I have this conversation with people, I feel like no matter what, I'll always be misunderstood for
Yeah.
using two names, and it's always being questioned as, is this kosher? Is this right? Is this?
It's very kosher.
And it's like, yeah, you don't understand that I feel the need to do this
Yeah.
because I see the direct results
Results,
when
yeah.
I do this. And, in all honesty, I just want to move. I just want to keep moving in
Yeah.
life, you know. So I try not to let things get to me. It will get to me if I know that I've tried A, B, C, and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
no D, right?
But also they're all legitimately your names.
Yes.
It's not like it's an alias. It's like those are your names, and so
Yeah.
it depends on. And for me, if they're being used against you,
Mm-hmm.
then you have every right to then say, well, then this is how I'm going to be known in this context because
Yeah.
this is what works best
Yeah.
for whatever it is that I'm trying to evolve. I'm not going to
Yeah.
be like, I'm not going to be put in a pigeonhole because it's hard enough, I think, trying to stake where you're from.
Yeah.
That one is bad enough. In an engagement where people already don't think you're from there,
Yeah.
it's like then trying to say, okay, this is where I'm from in both cultures
Yeah.
is important. So whichever way you need to navigate and cope with that, I think is
Yeah.
super important.
Yeah.
And so you moved back to Ghana and then you were working on Alma.
Mm-hmm.
And how did so you've done a lot of work with Niyama, I think, over
Yeah.
the years in terms of the projects that you've worked on. And so then what kind of birthed Space Accra? Because I remember this
Frustration.
being like, oh, Space Accra. Oh, Charles. Then I was like, who's Charles? Then Hamude. I was like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, and then you were like rapidly doing some incredible projects. And I was like, this is so cool. Like,
Yeah.
really, really. Because there's no brand that I know that was like a Ghanaian construction brand that goes up against the like international kind of,
Yeah.
there's very few of them.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
architectural firms like Otner and stuff like
There,
that.
yeah, there are, but in design and build.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think
You said frustration.
frustration. Yeah, frustration. I think my last job, which was Alma Colonial Suites, we had finished it. There were no new construction projects, and so the only offer that was on the table was to manage the hotel and set up the structure, which was very interesting. I learned a lot from that, but I knew that I was here to design and build, right? I knew that my passion was designing stuff, and I knew that my strengths were building stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I knew that with the little experience that I had in working for Ni and working for myself, like my sister's restaurant, etc.,
Yeah.
is and I started noting these things down. I still have the notebook. Is I started identifying a gap that I felt this is it, and it was and that was space turnkey solutions, right? I realized in everything that I did that the biggest disconnect in our industry, which is construction and architecture, is the communication, right?
Yeah.
It was at that
Usually
time, yeah.
is.
And 2015, 2016, there was no official design and build firm in Ghana.
Yep.
There were people that were dubbing themselves design and build, but it was more of design bid build or design bid outsource structure, right?
Yes.
And I
design and then get someone else to hand. Yep.
yeah. So I remember doing research into design and build firms, and then I found out that there were pretty much like 5 in the U.S. that seemed to be doing very well. And so I looked into it, and then I just realized that I need to get people to trust that one person should do
all
the
of
job,
those things,
right?
yeah.
You can hold them accountable, you can hold them liable. And so I started with my sister's first project. My sister's project was my first turnkey project, right?
Yeah.
So I designed it, I priced it out, I went to get the materials, and then I built it.
And then the dollar screwed you.
And then yes, oh my god. And then the next one was Lancaster University,
Oh, amazing.
which was the campus in East Legon, and that was truly the birth of space, because
Yeah.
that was a 1,200 square meter project that I had to design, price, and build. So that was 18 hours.
Was it
a
the
day.
one at ANC Mall or what they moved into?
No,
after?
ANC, the one in ANC Mall,
yeah.
right? I worked really hard on that project by myself, made so many mistakes, didn't make a profit, but at least I managed to get
Yeah.
the project done. And that was when I was like, I need to start a company, right?
Yeah.
And so I wrote everything down. My sister gave another chop bar project, right? And so yeah, towards the end of that project, it was like, yeah, this is what I have to do, right?
Yeah.
And being my sister, we negotiated, and instead of final payment, I got a laptop and some 5,000 CDs. Well, I needed the laptop.
yeah.
I needed the laptop. Thanks, Mona. And so yeah, so I had
It always comes from your family first anyway.
Yeah.
So that's how it's going to work.
Yeah, and then I had this stupid idea of creating a design and build firm, and I remember telling Mona, and Mona was like, "Yeah, let me get your CV." You know, I was like, "Let me get your CV." My dad was like, "You can work at Rafi's place for," and I was like, "No, this is not happening. This is not happening. I cannot
Stop
be."
giving me your CV.
Yeah, and then also it's like I also didn't want to come back to Ghana to be an employee, because if I was going to be an employee, I would be a much more happier employee in Holland, with everything. And employment in Ghana is really hard. And finding a person to work for that you can look up to is very hard. Finding someone with a good work ethic is very hard, right? So for me, it was like, this is like, no, it's do or die. I have my safety net. I can go back to Holland and I can work as per my degree requires me or allows me to, and I can do that. For now, I'm here. I was 25. I was really hungry. I was really frustrated. I really wanted to prove to everyone I left behind in Holland that I was not coming back to Ghana just to, hang around, you know. And I was also trying to prove to everyone here that, like, I missed.
There's a reason why I did that.
I was a foolish boy when I was young, but, like, people can't change, right? And so it really drove me. And so with the first batch of money that I had, I remember paying for the construction, for the registration documents, and finding this guy on the beach who was looking for a job, and I was like, wow, this is what I have, so I can pay you parts. And this guy, Corey, bless his soul, was like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I had a general manager, and I was like, okay, then what do we
Still a
need?
general manager?
No. He was with me for 3 years, and he really did a great job in helping set it
There's
up.
always those people at the beginning
Yeah.
that I think are so critical to, like, setting up an event and, like, setting up a space or, like, a company or whatever it is that just those first employees, there's always something about them.
The first employees,
Like, the belief in that vision, I think is so interesting. Like, to be an employee and be like, yeah, I'll take it. I think about my first hire, Mame. She went to school with me, but she was, like, in Guido's year at school. And she was one of my first employees and my first assistant, and literally is the one who helped me come up with the idea for the pallet seating.
Oh yeah, the pallet seating.
Like, do you know what I mean? And it's like, so I'll never forget that, and never forget that contribution, because it was such a critical part. And at that beginning stage, like, their input just sets a tone for the rest of the business that sometimes is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So interesting.
I was really blessed, because the first few years it was just Corey, Jessica, and then Sharif, and and again.
I remember that.
Yeah, again, I think that I was very lucky to find people who believed in the stupidity that I was
Why
that
do
I
you
was
think
about
it's stupid,
to.
though?
Because no one has followed me since, and every time I talk to somebody about design and build firm, they're like,
They're
"Are
like,
you
"Are you
sure?
out of your
Like, are
mind?"
you sure?" Yeah, because it's like, there's a lot of things that you have to do from start to finish, and you build up a relationship with people, with your clients, and it becomes a very emotional one. It becomes a very and I'm very
intense.
I'm intense, right? I'm intense, especially when it boils down to design and build, because that's just something that I feel like it's my life's work. You know, I drive through town and I get extremely proud when I see that something is still standing.
And I think that's that's the really interesting thing about what you do, is that it's something that is structural, it's there, and it should be there for a really long time, right? And so the amount of energy and passion and intensity, it does require that, because you don't want people are going to experience it in all sorts of ways, aren't they? Driving past, being in it, all that sort of stuff. So it's like, it really does. Like, when I think about our industry, where events are so fleeting, and it's one of the most upsetting things for me in some way, is that you work like months for 2 days, and you build this thing that can take 2 weeks sometimes to build up, and it takes a day to pull down.
I think emotionally,
and it's rough. Like, sometimes it's really rough, because you're like, can we just keep it for like one more hour just so we can like savor it, and then it just kind of gets broken down, and then you move on, and you literally move on to the next thing like it never existed. And it's that's an interesting one. So I usually enjoy my events through the pictures. That's really what I've got. Like the pictures and the videos. That's where I like actually enjoy them afterwards.
They don't stay, and I'm lucky. I get
you
to
have a physical.
I get to sometimes I get to visit them back sometimes, or most of the times with a lot of our clients, is that we get to come back and maintain these projects, right? So it becomes
especially when maintenance culture in Ghana is so
poor. So we actually even press and push on it, right? Because another thing is that we like, I don't know how to say this without sounding really fucking cheesy, but I think that I really like what I do, and I think that creating this design and build company has made every project a journey. You know, it is not I need to give you these designs, someone else goes and builds it, someone prices it. It really takes away the love and the passion.
I was gonna say.
But the beginning, you know, meeting a client for the first time and listening to this grand idea that he is giving you that you have to shape and sand down into
Into
a
what is
bite
actually
size, but
manageable.
yeah, what's to the budget, right? That
The budget.
yeah, you know, that first step is where everything begins. And
Yeah.
I always like to tell my people, is like, we're no different than famous painters.
Yeah.
We're no different than famous sculptors. But the thing is that how we create art is not through pen and brush. How we
Yeah.
create art is through taking an idea,
Yeah.
creating a shit ton of documents,
Yeah.
right? That you're going to use to bring it to life, and then
Yeah.
actually bring it to life,
Yeah.
you know, and then
Creating. Like
yeah.
you are in the process of, you are in the business of creation.
Yeah.
Which I think is amazing. But I also think it's incredibly challenging in our world and in our side of the world, where I mean there's a access issue in terms of getting things, but how do you navigate the people? Because I think creativity here is something that um we have an abundance of, right? I think Ghanaians are very creative people
Wow. Yeah.
like in all kinds of ways,
Mhm.
right? So they're creative in a million different ways,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
for the good and for the bad. Like we are creative people. If you give us a system, we know how to take it down.
Yeah.
We are creative. Like do
Yeah,
you get what I
we
mean?
are
And
very- yeah.
I think that's very intelligent.
Yeah.
But just within the structures that we have. Now, when you're building a business or you're trying to put a business together and you have a structure and you have a process and you have a system, you have an outcome and you have a standard that you're trying to achieve, when sometimes the education level or when sometimes the systems that we have in Ghana don't really allow us to naturally have that like you would in
Mhm.
other instances, how have you created sort of within your company, or what are the important things within your company that allow your employees to really like thrive or find the right employees to help you deliver that goal? Because that's
Mhm.
one of the people are like central to what you do,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
they're central to what like I do, for example. And I'm interested to kind of compare notes a little bit on like what you've created and how you create that environment for them. Like what's important to you for creating that.
Yeah, no, I think what I've learned over the years, and I've learned a lot over the years, right? Um, is that people are the most important thing. And I started my career with the money is the most important thing.
No.
And after I missed the third target, I knew that this was not going to be
Yeah.
sustainable. At least it was not going to feed my soul,
Yeah.
right? Funny, the first three employees that I had, I fell out with them,
Yeah.
right? They left the company, and it was sad, and it took a long time for me to understand what I
Why?
had done wrong,
Yeah.
right? And then I learned from that, and then the second wave came, right? And then, you know, it was all about getting them to do what needed to be done, right? And that ended up in a lot of frustration as well. So that ended up in
Frustration on both sides.
on both sides, on
Yeah.
both sides, on both sides, where it was like the expectation was there, the capability was there, and the understanding was there, right? And it's like you go through a couple of employees until you get it right. And I think that in the last batch, over the last few years, I've started to realize that um that often at times what businesses do in Ghana is they focus too much on what's happening outside.
Yeah.
The jobs, the clients, the
Yeah,
network,
I agree.
the this, the that.
Yeah.
And then you find a lot of CEOs getting distracted with trying to achieve
Yeah.
outward goals, right?
Yeah.
When inward goals are very, very important, right? So one of the
100%.
first things that one of the things that I've always done and I will continue to do is I have a no door policy. Also, I have meetings with the entire team, right? Everyone is privy to contracts, everyone's privy to client conversation, everyone's privy to finance, everyone's. And why is that? I cannot expect someone to do what I want them to do if they don't understand what it is that we're doing, right?
Yes.
And also this culture of compartmentalizing information,
Yeah.
out of the fear that they might take your information elsewhere.
It's valid, but it's
Is valid if really
Yeah.
the intellectual property that you are protecting
yeah,
is
it's
of
value.
is of value, is of
but if
any
it's just
substance.
like your
But most of the times it isn't, right? So I've really transitioned into a more a leadership approach where it is like I want to have everyone
involved.
involved
Yeah.
at all times.
That's so interesting because I think I really like having this conversation with you because I have that approach, and it's such a like outlier approach in terms of how things are done, right? Everyone's used to finance department. You don't really show anybody like the fight. Like we have a very like, this is the client budget. This is the budget we're assigning to the project. This is how we're navigating this. Okay, we are maxing out. Like we have to do everything on this client budget. Like there's so many things, but they are privy to that. And people are like, oh, but why? And it's like, because they need that information to do what they need to do.
Yes.
And they need to understand like how we're navigating, especially with events.
Yeah.
But also we do a thing where we, I remember someone advising me pretty early on that like employees, for example, will see maybe the client budget, will see the cost of the event, and then wonder where all the rest of the money goes, right? And so they think, well, why am I then being paid this? They don't really understand the context of the business. So like every year or like every half a year, we'll sit down with all the employees and we'll take them through all the expenses of the business. We will take them through everything and we'll say, this is what it costs. With or without you, this is what it costs. Every month, this is what we need to make. We need to make 50,000 CDs every month just to keep the lights on. Without your salary, without your benefits, without anything, this is what we need to make.
Yeah.
Right? So if you aren't contributing to that or you don't understand that, then you are then stuck in this slightly resentful space of like, oh, well, I'm only getting paid this. But when you understand that it costs 50,000, you know what the client budget is. You know that maybe we got this one big client for the last 3 months. So we've not had any other client in those 3 months. That budget is going to have to carry us for the next 3 months.
Yes.
Right? So now it puts some things into perspective.
And including them into that conversation defeats the whole notion and idea that there's 50,000 on the bill and there's 10,000 CDs in my pocket. That doesn't make sense. And I think that you're spot on. You're right. And I think that another thing that why it is required for you to be transparent and clear is that you want to spark that flame again, right? You want to because the two things. One of my accountant, who is now head of operations, he came from the north.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that he was coming to apply for a job, and he was from he was from Larabanga.
Wow.
And he came and he applied for the job, and it was my mom who interviewed him.
Oh,
and
wow.
I remember he looked really off. He looked really off. I walked into the office, I looked at him, I was like, Ma. And then she's like, you sit down and wait. So I had the interview. After the interview, my mom says, hire this guy.
Yeah.
And I was like, but Ma, his English is not even, sorry, Mike. But no, he came, 2 different colors of socks, his food's like soles. My mom was like, hire this guy, this guy. So I hired this guy, right? So very quiet. He read every single document, everything. He just went into the company to understand the company. Then he started studying accounting. So he's doing his chartered accounting. This guy is first. He has had the highest score in Ghana, 22nd in the world, for his tests.
What?
He comes to the office 7 days a week. After work, he studies. On the weekend, he brings his child, his son. He turns the office into a playground, and then he studies.
Wow.
Right? And I remember on one of his employment reviews, on one of the employment reviews that I had with him, and I asked him, and I said, why stay here? And then he said, in my previous job, if I had an idea or I wanted to suggest something and I did and it was not good, I would be met with, are you stupid? Or why are you talking? Why are you? And then he said, what the difference here is that at this company, you are forced to use your voice.
Yeah.
Because, Charles, you can be in the morning meeting having a conversation with this one and notice that someone is distracted, and I would just tend to have a full-on meeting with you.
Yes.
You get what I mean? And I need your valuable input, right? And I will call you out when I feel like you are, you get me? So I think one of the most important things is that a lot of people, young professionals in Ghana, they have the motivation. They just lost the voice through because in school, at home,
anywhere, you're not allowed to communicate. And it's one of the biggest challenges that we face. I have a similar approach. When you come to Jamja, you cannot speak. No. You cannot present. You can't sit there quiet. I will ask you a question and we will sit in silence until you're ready to speak. We will be patient for you to speak and we will give you those opportunities. But, you can't just like sit there and be quiet. Everyone has an opinion. I want to hear, even if it's not what I want to hear, I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's 100% right. Like we have a process. We use Slack a lot. That's our main like kind of communication thing. And the reason we have it there so that everyone can be held accountable. Everything must be documented via Slack. You must put all your actions and everything so that if you've put something and maybe I didn't see it or maybe I didn't respond or whatever, you can be like, Francis, I put it
Yeah.
on Slack. Or maybe I responded and I've forgotten what my response was. You can be like, well, you approved it. It's
Yeah.
about accountability on
Yeah.
both
And it
sides
goes
and
both ways.
respect.
Yes.
Right? So that they feel like, oh, they have a space. And I think that's what when people complain about hiring in Ghana, I'm like, but what environment are you creating for the people to thrive in?
Yeah.
Because I think that here you will get undying loyalty in certain instances. And don't get me wrong, there are people who will take advantage and there's
Of
people who
course.
naturally will do that. But my experience so far has been that, like, especially we've also gone through a couple of waves of
Yeah.
people, but like when we've set up a certain infrastructure for accountability and respect and like openness, you find that no one is leaving.
No. No one wants to
No
go.
one wants to go.
Yeah.
And so anyone who's gonna go is because you are letting them go. It's not
Always.
because and so like a really high staff retention, no real issues with like, what do you call it? HR issues. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's little day-to-day things, but
Yeah.
that's just the nature of Ghana.
Yeah.
Right? And you just have to have your employment kind of based around that.
And you
right?
solve and you solve it. You solve
Yeah.
it. You don't need it. You do.
Find
I always say
solutions.
that. Yeah, I always say that. It's great to have HR. It's great to have HR, but good leadership skills can also do the
Help,
job. You
yeah.
know, and it's also like putting yourself as an objective entity, right? Saying, yeah,
Yeah.
I am the CEO, but I'm willing to level with you and come
Yeah.
to
An
that's
agreement, a reasonable
yeah.
agreement that works for the company and works for you.
Yeah.
Because I think it's that balance. I
No.
always have that, like, it gets to a point for me. I mean, I don't know how many employees do you have? No.
On at Space right now we are full-time employment 12.
Yeah, we're the same.
Yeah.
Full-time employment at 12. And it's an interesting place to be with 12, I think,
Yeah.
because it's like, it's just enough, it's manageable.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like 10 more, and I definitely need an HR man.
Oh no, 100%. Yes, then you
can't-
need none.
I can't
Then it's too
continue
many.
like little things that it's
Yeah.
like, no,
Yeah. See, HR is definitely required when you start losing the names or the positions of your people or how much you're paying them or where they're supposed to be sitting. Then yes, right. But if you know everybody if you know everybody by name, by character, and
Yeah.
you meet with them on a daily
Daily
basis,
basis, yeah.
you should be close to
Yeah.
them. You know.
But
you
that's the thing for me in thinking about scaling and the company scaling. I'm trying not to lose that culture, like maintaining that culture as much as possible in every element of what we do, because otherwise, then the people, for me, if I don't continue to maintain the people at the center of some of that, or like keep that culture of the center, then as it scales, it potentially gets lost.
what makes you think that you're the author of the culture?
I feel like I'm the holder of the culture. I'm not necessarily the author of it. I
You're the
think,
holder.
like
yeah.
the conserver of it, to make sure that we don't lose that space that we've provided, because we created it in some senses.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure that although it evolves, it maintains its like integrity?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, here, that's chicken or egg. What
Yeah.
came first? What do you do first? Do you
Yeah.
let the people handle
Yeah.
the culture? Do you manage it? Are you going to let that fear be the blockade of your expansion? And then another thing is like, look, your expansion is going to
It's gonna happen.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Like,
But are you planning on scaling as well?
100%.
Yeah. Do you want like to double your stuff? Like, what's your scale plan?
I want to become the biggest in this country.
Country or Africa, my friend?
Oh, in Africa.
I was gonna say, let's
Africa.
go Africa.
Yeah. But
When you say this country,
no, step by step.
it's
I want to. I want to make my mark. I want to make my mark. I have
100%.
I have a passion. I have a passion for this country that sometimes I don't even understand myself.
Yeah. I think we all do, to be a little mad to come and set it up in the conditions like we are currently dealing with.
Yeah.
No lights, no electricity, no internet, no cash flow.
Yeah.
Very little.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you want to be in this market at all? I haven't had lights at home for 2 days. No AC, no fan. It's been real.
Yeah, but I mean, don't you just feel alive right now? Doesn't it? I don't know. I'm a little crazy.
Does.
I'm a little crazy.
It does.
But I love problems.
Like, no, I love it. The thing is, it doesn't affect me. I don't get I'm similar. I'm not like, oh, it's a bit shitty in moments because you're just like, well, this is really hot. But then last night I was
It's really
like,
hot.
well, this is it. This is what it is. So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna have to navigate the way it is. But then
Yeah.
I think about like the rest of the globe, and we're in this little like microcosm of Accra right now, dealing with all this kind of situation, and like the rest of the world is just continuing. And I had a call yesterday, and I was like, yeah, we've had no lights, no electricity, no internet, and they're like, what?
Yeah.
Like they've not heard about it. They don't know.
No,
There's
no.
no concept of what this thing is, and yet you're still on a call with them, and you still found a way to like continue. And to me, that is just the essence of like
That's
when
it.
people talk about businesses in this part of the world. I'm like, yeah, boy, you have no idea.
No, you need to be a cowboy, bro. Like,
Yeah,
that's
you
what I
need to
call
be-
this
I
the
call-
Wild
me
Wild
too.
West.
I
That's
was
like,
just about to say that. I call this the Wild West.
oh.
If you want to come to the Wild West, come to Accra.
Yeah, no.
Come and start in Accra. Then you can go to
Yeah.
Nigeria, and then you can go to East,
My
Wild
God.
East in Kenya. But
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's wild.
No, it's wild. It is wild.
So then how do you find your release in the Wild West? Because I see all your videos venturing out, exploring, like clearly getting lost makes you feel.
I can see it in my face right now. Right?
So tell us what you do, because I want to come on one of these adventures. Where do you go?
Okay, so yeah, I literally tried to go everywhere, right? So in 2017, I met this crazy Portuguese guy, and he put me on the fact that Ghana was so safe you can go and sleep anywhere. You know, that's where it started. And I love to surf, paraglide, do some motocrossing, rock climbing. I'm a very active guy, right? So Ghana is paradise, right?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Ghana outside of Accra, that's the real.
Yeah.
So it just started simple. We got 2 tents. We went, packed a bag, little stove, and some food, and we went to Gomofete, and we found this abandoned house. There was a caretaker. We gave him some money, a little bit of food, and we said we're sleeping here. And then the thing is that people are like, "What? How?" You know, there's never been a moment that anyone has told us no.
No.
It has always been, okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah, are you sure? We went to Keita. Are you sure? We went to Gomafete. Are you sure? Winneba. Are you sure? Apam. Are you sure? Cape 3 Points. Axim. Kwehu.
Oh my
you name it.
gosh.
Akosombo. You name it. Volta
Yeah.
region.
And everyone is just like, are you sure? They don't say no though.
No one says no.
Yeah.
No one says no. And even if sometimes where we go to places like a little bit remote,
Yeah.
and then we just look for the closest community.
Yeah.
Go in there and say, hey, we want to go and sleep there.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might even have the elder send one of the guys to just
Be there.
hang around. No, so
That's. I think that's the essence that people are missing
yes,
of Ghana. It's like Ghana is not Accra,
no,
right? And so the minute you go out, because people are so just open. People are
Yeah.
just living.
people, and they'll help you. They'll
Yeah.
help you with anything. We were speaking earlier about me
Yeah.
going on that trip to look for the salt ponds in
Yeah.
Nyanyano. And we drive into this swamp area, and we're constantly getting stuck. The sun is going down. We're in basically cow dung, digging ourselves out, and there are people walking by dressed completely as if they're coming from church or somewhere, and they stop and they help you.
Yeah.
You know, and they stop and they help. And there's no place in Ghana that I've been that I think to myself, shit, I'm not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
Let's say outside of Accra,
Yes.
there is nowhere that I
Wow.
feel like I shouldn't be here,
here.
or that there's no moment that I'm lying in a tent or sleeping in a
And you
hammock
feel
in
afraid.
between trees, and then I feel like I need to be watching out.
Wow. I really hope we don't lose that essence, because that's one of the things that like worries me the most about being here, especially when you're just in Accra sometimes.
Yeah.
You're just like, oh, this is so crazy. Are we losing like the essence of what when we grew up in Accra and just how we knew Accra
That's
to be?
not anymore. Yeah.
Like that's not anymore.
That is
but
changing.
like you can get it when you go outside of Accra.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah,
I love
Accra
that.
is changing rapidly.
Yeah.
Accra is changing fast. The rest of the country is taking a different pace. It's definitely taking a different pace.
Yeah.
So it is nice, and I think that that's a blessing of the blessing of Ghana is that you can be in Accra
yeah.
and be in the hustle culture. Nothing else matters. Money, pay me. I did it. Pay me. You know that.
Oh my
how-
god, the chasing of money.
Ghana
in
is
this
a
country.
Ghana is a very hustle, transactional. Everything is business. How much can I make? So it's nice. From Monday to Friday, I thrive on that. You know, it's what wakes me up in the morning, and it's what puts me to bed when I get home.
'Cause you're shattered.
Well, I'm shattered, yeah. So you have that, and then Saturday morning, 4 a.m., you get in the car, and you start
Driving, and you
driving.
just don't know where you're going.
And you just
I love that.
you know a direction. You know that I can make it all the way to Inzulezu, but there's so many stops. So maybe I'll stop at Maha, maybe I'll stop at Lemon, maybe I'll stop in Cape Coast,
Yeah.
maybe I'll go this way, maybe and it's nice. If you have one or two friends, all you need is two bad boys. And that's it. You are safe, you are sound. As long as
I
you're
love
driving
that.
and one person is awake, you can just no,
Yeah.
it's and I think a lot
That's
of
so
people,
cool.
even Ghanaians, even people who my employees are like, Charles,
Yeah.
when can I come with you?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Anytime.
but you want to come camping? He's like, yeah, I want to come camping. It's like, but we shit on the beach. What? And it's like, yeah. So it's like, even a lot of Ghanaians are like, no, you can't do this. Where you sleep in a tent? There's no toilet. It's like, so for me, and I think it's such a beautiful.
Everyone wants to come, but they don't really want to.
Everyone wants to come, but when I
experience
tell you that 4:30 in the morning I'm picking you up, that's the first no for a lot of people. How I filter out the right crowd
the serious people.
is I pick you up very early.
Yeah, of
if you
course.
don't want to wake up before 6,
Then
you're
that's not
not
your
part
problem
of
on a
we call it the
Saturday.
Tropicalia.
Yeah.
You don't want to see paradise, right? You don't because they'll be like, oh, let's leave at 8 and then beware,
No.
Kaswa till 10 like
No
before.
way,
No,
you've
so
lost your whole day.
yeah,
It's like we go hiking on the weekend, and we get up at 4
yeah,
a.m. so that we leave the house at 5 so that we're at hiking spot by 6.
yeah,
And then you do your hike in the morning, and then by 12, 1, you're home.
yeah, yeah.
But like you can't start that at 8. You will die in the
No,
heat. Like,
you can't. And you want to leave. You wanna leave early. Get to wherever you are early. And then Ghana is also another thing that I think is so beautiful is that what I notice a lot about living in Ghana is that there are still so many places where you can be completely alone.
and it's quiet.
What? You go to like Cape 3 Points, like the beach
Yeah.
there. This is a beach stretch of maybe like 1 kilometer. And sometimes you wake up in the morning and you start walking and you walk for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, then you walk back and you haven't seen a single soul. You grab your surfboard,
Oh
you
my
go
God,
out,
that's
you
paradise.
surf, you don't see a single surfer. You walk back, you
Wow.
don't see anything. It's
Oh my
like, how
God.
many more places in the world are there that you can literally...
That's amazing. Because I went to Reddington Spa, Reddington Beach Resort, which is past Keita,
Yeah.
for like a retreat thing with Irina actually, and we were just standing on the beach, and like there were people obviously, but it was so quiet, and I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
you just don't get this as much anymore. I mean, pure silence. And the guy at the what's it called, reception wanted to crank up. I said, hey, turn the music
Yeah,
down. Oh my
how do we
gosh.
get this out of us?
But
This
it's-
music,
that's what
right?
that one, yeah, like that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But so what is Charles's palaver at the moment?
What's my palaver in which sense?
What's your palaver? It can be anything. Good palaver, bad palaver.
My palaver right now, I think, is... Let's not even talk about the internet. That is small
The
palaver.
internet is just undersea cables that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, I think what is my palaver? I must have some palaver. I always come over as a very positive guy, but I always cry at night. And that's when the palaver actually comes to my mind. But yeah, no palaver now. I think the big question for me is becoming the what's next question. I started this adventure and this journey early 20s, right? I'm 33, turning 34. I have Space Turnkey Solutions, which is doing amazing. I have the Wawa Group, which has started growing significantly. I have
Amazing.
my barber shop.
Yeah, I heard you do barbershops. What?
I just Fuego Barbers.
Where is this?
This is on the main Trade Fair Road. So I started this actually with...
God.
So a former employee of
So
mine...
barbershop, and you said what's Wawa Group?
Wawa
What's-
Group is a property management
Okay,
firm.
okay,
So
nice,
what we do
nice,
is we
nice.
flip almost
Yeah,
completed or we manage already
Oh, I love
existing
that.
ones. So and I have a business partner from the US, Peter Yobo, amazing guy. Did a project for him in 2016. Then he came back and said, hey, I like your work, but
Yeah.
should we start a company together? And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, let's do this. And then,
I love
yeah.
that you have a barbershop. Everyone, you
Yeah.
need a small side hustle, Charlie.
Yeah, and you need. And the barbershop was even funny. It was a joke. I came back from South Africa. A former employee turned competitor turned best friend.
Oh, wow.
He started with me at 2019. He quit his job in 2021 and asked me to go for lunch with him. Took him for lunch and then he told me he wanted to start his own design and build company and that I had to help him. And I said, okay, this is weird, but
Sure.
let's do it. And he promised that he wouldn't do the same thing as I am. I have learned from him
Yeah.
since because he started a remote work basis. So I'm learning from him a lot, right? So I come back from South Africa where I took a break for 2.5 months, and then he calls me and he says, "What is this place? And the rent is like 500 CDs. What should I do?" I was like, "Take it." And he's like, "Okay, but should we do something together?" I was like, "Okay, come up with an idea." And then he goes like barbershop, and I was like,
Genius,
"Okay." And I was like, "I have the materials in the storeroom. All we need is the chairs, the clippers, the rest. I got it." So we said, "Okay,
I
let's
love
start."
it.
So we found these two amazing barbers and a shop manager, and we said, okay, so what do we do with this newfound business and love, right? What do we want? And then we said, okay, you know what, the goal is to transform the barbering experience in Ghana, which has been stagnant for the past 20 years. Every barbershop that you come, whether nice, not nice, there's always some form of music playing, either football, the lights are white. There's a very significant, from Kenzo to Nobleman to anything, the experience has flatlined. Whereas you have now polished and excuse me, women have upgraded
Yeah,
their
we've
beauty.
upgraded it,
Yeah.
man. We were levels.
It went from barbershop on top to beauty salons being on top, right? So we were like, okay, how do we start small? Understand what it is that we can change about this experience, right? So it's kind of like it's an R&D
Yeah, I love
project.
it.
So
That's
we
so
started,
cool.
and then we was like, we do booking only because people want to book and have this, right? So then we start this booking platform, and it goes completely south. No one's booking, right? So it's like, okay, why are they not booking, and why were we thinking they were going to do it? And then we looked, and then it's like we look at the menu that they can book, and it's too extensive, so we short it. Then we do. So it is like this,
Yeah,
you
trial
know,
and error.
and the overheads are so low.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You need to cut 100 heads to break even. So we have the calculation on 100 heads to break even. And we said a month. So it's like as long as we cut 100 heads,
Yeah.
this business is open.
Is it?
And we are going to learn how
Yeah.
to slowly
I
change.
love this.
And then you learn about barbers. Then you learn about the barbering culture. Then you learn about the etiquette.
And it's called what? Fuego Barber.
Fuego barbers. Fuego
Love
barbers.
it.
So yeah, so that's
I love
yeah.
it. So that's what's next. Your barbering empire.
No, so yeah, that's coming now. No, so what's next is like, no, what's next is the question is like, do I just continue just doing businesses and this entrepreneur thing, or like I feel like one of the things that also I was talking to you about, which I like about your podcast is, and I think that is very important, at least I've had to struggle a lot with it, and it is being an entrepreneur. Maybe being an entrepreneur in Ghana is harder than the rest of
No,
it,
I
but
think
just
everywhere.
in general,
Yeah.
you
It's
know,
lonely.
it's
It's a
lonely,
very
it's
lonely,
lonely, it's confusing.
You have to trust your gut a lot. You have to trust yourself. You have to also be okay with yourself when it doesn't go so well.
Yeah.
Like I think but it's also something that I always say to people. People are like, oh, especially in Ghana where it's like everyone should become an entrepreneur, and I'm like, no.
No.
Not everyone should become an entrepreneur. It is not for everyone. It is also okay if it is not for you. Because we've also made it into this thing where it's like, if you're not an entrepreneur, somehow you're failing at life.
Yeah.
No, being a great employee is also a great achievement. Like, get your money, go to bed, and sleep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Being an entrepreneur is not that. Like,
It's not.
It is not that at all. And so I think the questioning of the entrepreneur thing as well is like everyone has their moments of like, I had my moments like, I think 2022, I was ready to be done. I was like, I'm done. I'm over this. Like, I just need to quit, shut up shop, bounce. Like, I'll figure it out. I'll be fine. I'll just do podcasting for the next, I'll do something.
Yeah.
But like, and then I had to kind of re-engage my passion, my belief, my kind of
My why.
find ways, in understanding my why. But I mean, I've said this before. It's like for me, scaling is next. The vision, that big vision, and so it's like figuring out what's your bigger vision. Yeah, you've done something in Ghana, but like, other parts of the continent, because the continent is massive, and
It is,
like the lessons you've learned about just getting out of Accra and how people are helpful is the same on the rest of the continent. It's the experiences I've had. People have helped me.
Yeah.
I have not had an experience of like someone standing in my way when I'm like, oh, I'm coming to Kenya, I need this, and this, and they're like, no.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't have that anywhere.
This misconception of business in Ghana is something that really, Francis, you have to continue fleshing it out, right? I think, I think my palava is finding out why, just why are we like that?
Why are we like that?
Why are we like that? I have so many questions. Why are you always hiding what you are doing? You business owner, CEO. We are so
okay. So I think we need a part 2 to ask. I think you need to write
just
down
for that one.
all your questions,
No,
and
I
then
know.
we need to get into all of them because there's like
many
so
questions.
much.
And then the thing is also, I think another thing is that we don't talk to each other,
Yeah.
and I don't know is because we're trying to hide that we
No,
don't
I
have
think
our things
sometimes it's the
together.
time.
Huh?
It's the time. Like I realize, like it's not that I haven't wanted to speak to you.
Ah, no, no,
I just
not in
haven't.
no, not in that sense, right? But don't you
Oh,
find
you
it
mean?
a little hard to understand how people operate?
Yes.
I think that a lot of people, they
Yes.
one, we have this fear that you're going to steal my idea.
Yes.
Two,
Definitely.
we are also have this a
Because
little
people actually do.
people do, yeah, no, this
I've
one,
I've I've faced it.
yeah, as a matter of fact,
Like
yeah,
so blatantly
yeah,
from
yeah,
people who
yeah.
are close to you. So you you
Just
get this
remind me
like
something.
exactly.
It's happening right now, actually. Yeah?
So there you go.
Jeez,
So
yes,
that's
no,
his current palaver.
that's what.
On that
Yes.
note, on that note, we will wrap it up. But thank you for being here. I think there's a part 2 to come, so we can answer all your whys.
Yes, yes. I'll bring them
I
with
think you
me
need
next
to. I think
time.
you need
Yeah.
to just list them down,
No,
and then
why?
we're good to go.
Yeah.
But this
No.
was awesome.
Oh,
I
thank you
really
so
enjoyed
much
this.
for having me.
This
This was
fun.
nice. This was
We did
great.
it.
This was great. This was great.
Yeah, so that's a wrap. Palava people. I still need a name for my Palava people, but yeah, that's it.
That's a good question. Cheers.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I'd love you to leave me a comment or a question. And while you're here, like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on those notifications.